We're delighted to have Brigitte Stangl joining us today from the University of Surrey. She's probably one of the more qualified speakers, I think it's fair to say. I think she's got more degrees than I've had at ever hot dinners. A doctor's in social and economic studies, 2 master's degrees from Vienna University, I think. The IFITT/JITT Excellence Awards for a PhD. Or no, the other way around, it's the Excellence Awards, and then the Austrian Rudolf Salinger Award for a PhD, which is probably a good way to set out her credibility before we start. Since 2012, she's been employed by the Hospitality and Tourism School at Surrey University. And actually what she's going to talk to us today about is the concept of innovative pricing. And as we come out of COVID, can people think about pricing in a different way to maybe how we have previously? And as these new sessions, as we come out towards the post-COVID time, if you like, or post-lockdown period time, or at least we hope post-lockdown, we want to use this Friday sessions to really explore new ideas, new thinking, new concepts. So we thought it was a particularly good way to kick off this idea. So Brigitte, can I pass over to yourself? And good luck, and very much welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody, from my side as well. And thank you so much for the introduction and for the invitation, Chris. It is my pleasure to talk about and share information about Pay What You Want, which has been my research now since I started in, I think it was 2010 with this topic. And Pay What You Want, or innovative pricing, basically is something where customers can pay whatever they want. So literally it is what it says. Customers decide the price and sellers can must accept whatever price it is. In terms of innovativeness in general and innovative pricing, one has to say that there is only a limited number of organizations, like 5% around the globe, who really involve or engage in innovative pricing. So when it comes to media, this is kind of an attraction for them, and it is a lot of free media coverage inside if one engages in such an innovative pricing strategy. So what is in it for you in this presentation? The goal basically is, first of all, obviously to introduce the Pay What You Want method or approach, to learn about how organizations have used it so far, what has worked and what didn't work so well. And everything I will introduce is either based on literature or based on real life examples or based on our own research. So I'm going to start with something which is nothing new for you, obviously, but I thought I would like to set the scene in terms of innovativeness or innovation in general. So as you can see here on the left-hand side, it's all about the environment, and basically the environment drives us and triggers that we must innovate, because there's new technology coming up, new policy regulations. If we think of COVID-19, there's lots going on, and on the which also includes that there is lots of competition. We basically are in global competition, and there is a high transparency for both, for quality and for price, because we have all those online platforms out there customers can access. If we look at this side over here, this is all about customers. And what we know and what we have to recognize about our customers is, in terms of traveling, that they are highly knowledgeable. They have experience. When it comes to service provision, they basically know what they can expect, which puts a lot of pressure on suppliers as well, because they have to deliver and they have to do something to stand out, basically, right? So to be innovative is kind of a prerequisite nowadays to be successful and progressive. The innovation is not like something where we have to do something which is a total breakthrough, but it's something that adds value to the customer. So this is something which I want to highlight. Innovation is something, whatever it is, whatever we do, as long as the customer sees it as added value, this is the innovation which is and which can lead us to success. And obviously in this entire dynamic environment we live now, COVID is coming in, and maybe whatever type of future viruses we are not aware of, which makes this entire environment of our competitors even more crowded, because everybody is trying now to get customers back, is trying to basically build the trust again that this relationship between supplier and customer is built again. So in terms of pricing now, if we move on from this one, everybody knows that price is an indicator for quality. For some services, it's the main selection criteria. And in terms of pricing now, we have the common strategies, and I would like to talk about this, what we call participative pricing strategies, which basically is a collaboration for between customer and supplier. And we have two main categories here. Both of them have been around for quite a while, but as I said, they have not been applied or used that much. So the first one is name your own price, which basically means customers suggest a price which they are willing to pay, and then the supplier can decide if they want to engage in this business or not. So if they say, no, this price is actually too low, I don't want it, they still have the chance to say, no, I don't want this relationship. Pay what you want, as I said, goes one step further. Here it's where basically the entire process of pricing goes to the customer. The customer is making the entire decision of what price they want to pay, including paying zero. And the supplier must accept. So it doesn't matter what the price is, the supplier always has to accept. And so in terms, I hope one can see this because I have the videos there a bit, but in terms of added value or innovativeness, so this is where the customers, because they can set the price, this is perceived as an added value for the customers. And how this works, basically, we're gonna talk about in a minute. And first of all, I would like to introduce a few examples just to show the short and long-term strategies. So basically, pay what you want can be used either as a long-term strategy. We don't have that many examples, to be fair, on this side. And we have quite a few of examples which use it as a short-term strategies for achieving various objectives. So the first example I would like to introduce is a long-term strategy. It's a restaurant in Vienna, Austria. It's called Vienna Divan. It's a Pakistani restaurant. And basically, they have been successful ever since 2005. They offer their buffet on a pay what you want basis, not the drinks, because drinks, they say, is not basically, they don't make any profit with drinks. Another long-term one is Panera Cares, which is a restaurant in America, and they operated 5 locations. But this one, they had to close after 9 years of operation. And according to the management, they said the main reason why they had to close is obviously non-paying customers, and the groups they identified are students and homeless. So this is something to consider as well. I also have 2 examples from short-term strategy, and one is the ARC Arts Center in Stockton-on-Tees, and they used it for a 6-month trial in 2015. And what I want to highlight for them is that they said the audience numbers were up by nearly 60%. And also they recognized that there were more first-time visitors compared to previous years, which is a good success. The second example is Impulsdance Vienna. They used it as a promotional activity. This Impulsdance Vienna is basically an international renowned dance workshop, and they provide all sorts of dance workshops with very popular and famous teachers. And they only gave this option to customers who already purchased workshops before. So only maybe what we want to call experienced customers were allowed to use this pay what you want option to pay for more workshops they want to attend. So the question really for all those examples that raises is what makes those organizations successful or succeed with this approach, and why do others fail? And the first and very important factor is timing. So research shows that if the payment for a certain consumption is after the consumption, after the experience, then the pay what you want prices paid are higher, which is not a surprise. A prerequisite obviously is that people are happy with the quality and are satisfied with the service they got. In terms of what we consider to frame and design this pricing approach, there is a huge difference compared to traditional price setting. So if we think of the normal or traditional price setting, what we are looking for, we try to find triggers, what makes people buy, right? In a pay what you want setting where people consume and pay after consumption, we try to find payment triggers, right? So this is an important point to highlight. And what we now want to know, of course, what payment triggers are there? And I put together an entire list for you. I put them in an alphabetical order because really it depends on the segment and it depends on the context you're in. I'm also not gonna talk about all those and explain all of them. If you have any questions, I guess we can discuss them afterwards. I want to highlight some in particular, the ones which in red here. So the first one is anonymity. And this is something which is interesting for us when it comes to the online context, which obviously is anonymous. And research shows if people have to pay in a pay what you want setting face-to-face, they will pay higher prices for various reasons, because they feel guilty, they feel ashamed, they don't want to be perceived poor. So all different sorts of reasons. And offline and face-to-face, they pay more, as I said. And the other factor I want to highlight is the newness factor. And this is when we think of the example of the arts center, then this showed, yes, they have a huge increase in people attending in the audience, and also many new first-time visitors. But the question remains, if people are coming back over and over, how much would they pay long-term, basically, right? So there might be this kind of fading out, that people are losing interest and it's not that much fun anymore once they did it, or they did it various times. I briefly mentioned already one of the biggest driver of the prices or the height of the prices paid is satisfaction. So satisfied people who are happy with what they experienced are prepared to pay money, and also pay a good share above what would their traditional price be in certain settings, to be fair. The last main point in terms of those alphabetical ordered factors I want to mention is sense of fairness. And what this means is that pay what you want in the areas where it has been applied, which is mainly Europe and America and Australia, people have a sense of fairness. So they want to pay for what they receive, and they have kind of an internal driver that it's not maximizing their own utility, but they want to be fair against the organization, and they want to have this good relationship between supplier and customer, basically. The ones which I put down here are the ones which I want to talk about in a bit more detail in the following. So all those ones, which is perceived product quality, the reference price, and cost knowledge, is where customers and suppliers have a different level of knowledge, which leads to what we call information asymmetry. So what this means is, when it comes to product quality, for example, suppliers obviously know exactly what the quality of the product is, but suppliers may not know it that well. So there is this gap, or this lack of knowledge from the customer side, and especially new customers may have a bigger gap compared to those who experienced a certain service already. Reference price is the one which has been researched most, and this is basically the price people have in their mind if they buy a certain product and where they think this should be around the range where this service should be sold and what is perceived as a fair price. And the last part is cost knowledge. And this is the topic we have been focusing recently because basically cost knowledge is the most direct signal of quality, but costs literally are kind of a very close kept secrets by organizations, and the real costs is for many perceived as kind of different. But in terms of knowledge gap, there seems to be a huge knowledge gap between what customers know and what suppliers know. So we're going to look at these three factors leading to information asymmetry in a bit more detail. And if we look at different contexts, I would like to show you a study which was done in 2009. And basically, if we look at the first context here, the restaurants, there seemed to be a good understanding or kind of a reasonable understanding from customers in terms of what the costs suppliers have in such a context. So the pay what you want approach works quite well for restaurants. And if we look globally, there are quite a few restaurants who use this approach. While when we look, for example, at cinemas, people really struggle to understand what they are paying for. So they have a huge gap in terms of knowledge when it comes to what does the supplier have to pay and what is the payment they make used for. And this leads to prices, when we look at the prices they pay, which are way below ticket prices cinemas would normally charge. So it doesn't really work for cinemas, according to this study. If we go back now, imagine, if we go back to our example, the Pakistani restaurant, which is highly successful. Let's imagine you gonna visit Vienna and you decided you have heard of this restaurant and now you decided you want to go for dinner to this restaurant, so you go online to book a table. So when you are online, then you obviously need to decide now how much do you want to pay for your meal tonight. So if you would think about the price, it's you can see how the location looks like, how much you would expect or how much you would be prepared in a pay-as-you-wish context to pay for your dinner tonight. Right? Now imagine further, having this price in mind, that you look and find online this link, which basically is a link to what they call the balance sheet. And once you click it, you see that what they provide here is literally all the information in terms of costs they have to pay for material, staff, taxes, transport, rents, everything. So you can have a close look at all those expenses they have. And now the question is, having all this information about their costs, would this change the price you had in mind before? Would you pay more? Would you pay less? Or would it be the same price? So this is basically the question we have been looking at in various studies. And the important thing to notice is Divan has been doing this for ages, but obviously there are also other organizations who follow this approach. And the organizations I'm introducing are follow slightly different approaches in terms of how they deal with revealing their costs, which normally is kind of a secret. So another example is Same Cafe in America, in Denver, and basically what they do, as you can see up here, they provide the costs of food for a meal and also the total cost per meal. So basically, in order to make it easier to understand for customers, how much is this for you as a single person, they break it down for them to give them information about those costs. Then we have other organizations who follow a different approach. So those two provide monetary costs, but others say for various reasons, actually monetary costs I really can't provide because of competition for whatever reason. So what they do, they provide cost structure information. And we can look at this one example, AdBlock. And basically what they are doing, they have their pay what you want setting. And then on the other side, they say, look, we're going to use the money you pay for improving the performance, for design, for payroll, for modernization, and for whatever other reasons. Another example is Humble, which is a digital provider, and they follow a slightly different approach again. Obviously, they use pay what you want as well, but what they do instead of providing the cost structure, they say to the customer, look, you're going to pay this amount of money. Now tell us, who do you think should get this money? So basically, they leave the option open and say, do you want the creators get the money, the charity, or maybe some Humble partners, right? So all different, slightly different ways of dealing with costs. The most recent example we have is this one, which is in a museum in Vienna. And as you may know, in Austria, they are a little bit ahead in terms of opening up in terms of lockdown. So most of the things are kind of back to more normal there. So museums have been open already. And what they try to do now is because the borders were closed, obviously, so there was a huge loss in terms of their income, right? So what they are trying to do, or they tried to do, it was a short-term campaign. They provided all the costs and revenues before COVID, and then they provided the situation how it looks like now. And we did a study with them, and we tried to look at how does this impact and which scenarios would be best in this case, which I will talk about a little about later. So all what those companies do basically is to try to signal to customers to close this knowledge gap, which is highly important because if they have a certain knowledge or the same knowledge even than suppliers have, then it's all about being fair. And as I said at the beginning, customers have a sense of fairness, and by signaling relevant information to judge the product quality from a supply side, customers can make a reasonable guess about what the price should be and what a fair price is. So basically this entire process of pay what you want is all built around trust. And giving information is trust, and also from the customer side, it's a lot of trust that they pay a reasonable price. So if we look at those three categories, so I presented mostly the cost information, how they deal with revealing those, because this is the one which has been done least. But obviously you can signal information for product quality, and price information is the one which has been researched most for decades. So there are tons of studies literally which have been looking at if we provide a certain price, how does this impact in terms of payment in such a setting. So far, there is no conclusion. So there are studies who say it's increasing prices. There are other studies who say it's decreasing prices because people feel it interferes in their freedom to set the price. And there are other studies who say it doesn't really make a difference. So it really depends on the situation and if people find the price that's suggested credible. If we look at the cost structure, here, and this is the reason why we looked at, because first of, as I said at the very beginning, it's the most direct signal of product quality. And the advantage of providing information about costs is that it has two effects really. One direct effect, which is closing this gap concerning what are the costs. And the second indirect effect is on being able to judge a fair price. Because if I know that there are certain costs, for example, in the cinema context, where people don't pay high prices because they don't know what it is all about. So this would help, or could help, to basically say, look, this is what we have to pay for, and then people may pay higher prices. Okay. In terms of signaling product knowledge, obviously there are all kind of ways how you can signal it. The first one is price, then you can see where you source your ingredients from, maybe locally, or there are guarantees, or even ratings or reviews, whatever. What we try to do in our studies is we compared the two customer groups, new customers versus the ones which have already experience with a certain service. And the most important aspects to consider for those groups is in terms of information processing. Because the experienced customers have experience, they don't rely so much on whatever information or marketing cues we put out there, because they have the past experience where they can draw upon and retrieve to make their decision in terms of what price they want to pay. For new customers, it's quite different, because they haven't experienced enough anything. They don't know anything about how satisfied they're gonna be after consuming this service. So they are highly relying on whatever cues we provide and whatever information we provide to them. And literature says so far, new customers generally tend to pay lower prices compared to experienced ones, because they have a less good understanding what a product is all about. So what we did is, together with Impulse Dance, which I introduced earlier, we tried to find out how does this look like in their case in terms of providing all this information. And what you can see here in this graph is we had different groups. So the first group of customers, new customers in this case, didn't get any information. The second group of customers got the reference price. The third group of customers got the cost structure information, and the third group of customers got both. So they got the reference price plus cost structure. And what we can see here, reference price has quite an impact. So if we only provide the price to them, then this gives them already a sense and they increase their price compared to no information. If we give them only cost structure information, it doesn't make a difference, because they can't interpret it. They don't know what to do with information. What does it mean in terms of money or value now if you have the cost structure information? The astonishing part of this one is, if you put both pieces of information, so reference price and cost structure information, it literally boosts prices, and they go up on average by more than 50%. So this is for new customers. If we look at experienced customers, the picture looks quite different. If we provide them with information, we also get higher prices paid, like in this case, plus more than 20%. But if we look at this graph, for them, really it doesn't matter. If we give them reference price, cost structure, or both pieces of information, there's no difference. Either information they get, it would lead to the same increase, right? So now let's compare the two groups. As you can see, and as suggested by literature, the new customers here coming in this turquoise color generally pay less than experienced customers. So this is not a surprise. This is true if they get no information for the reference price and for cost structure. The astonishing part now is, if we give them both pieces of information, they pay more or less the same price than experienced customers, which basically means by giving them this information, we were able to close this information gap between new customers and experienced customers, right? So ideally, obviously, this means to provide both pieces of information. We then went one step further and looked at cost types. So there are different types of costs we can provide to our customers. In this impulse dance workshop example, the alignable costs would be costs for teachers and around teachers, which are the main aspect to make the experience. And non-alignable costs would all be all sorts like rent or for the location and dance floors or transport, technical equipment, or whatever support staff, for example, cleaning or first aid or whatever is out there. And what we can see here in this graph is if we give them the non-alignable costs or the cost structure, people really don't care. It's the same thing as if you give them no information. But if you give them information about what matters to them, which are the teachers, what we got is like nearly a third or 30%, more than 30% increase of prices paid. Right? So what do we learn from this information here? First of all, obviously, information asymmetry is the key relevant cause for low payments. And it is the best way of doing it is to provide both pieces of information. With this way, you basically reach new customers and experienced customers. We also did some insights showing that if you provide cost structure information, it increases payments of the lowest paying groups, which is true for experienced and new customers. And one has to consider knowledge, product knowledge. So in our case, the difference between new and experienced customers. All this information now is true for, is of value for all organizations who want to engage in Pay What You Want, but or already engage in Pay What You Want, but also for charities who receive donations, because this is kind of follows a very similar principle, just with a few more aspects. The last thing I would like to present, as I announced earlier, is about this project concerning COVID-19 of the museum. So the study finished 3 days ago, and the data collection, a lot of it was offline. So we only got the data set this morning. So I don't have real results, but I would like to share some insights concerning how they did it and how they approached it and what worked, what we know so far, and what didn't work so well. So remember what we did is, or what they did basically is to provide their costs and revenues before COVID and how it looks now. And they did engage in quite some marketing activities. However, if we asked people at the museum, the majority, and this is like the vast majority, didn't know about the campaign. They didn't know that this Pay What You Want was going on. So obviously their marketing, they did engage in marketing, but it was not prominent enough. It was not prominent enough on the website, not in the newsletter, not in social media. And this is a big limitation, obviously, because this way they didn't attract new customers, which is one of the main reasons why people want to do Pay What You Want. There's a short-term strategy to reach new targets, to reach new audiences, to maybe enter even a new market, or in this case, to build the trust again and get people back and yeah, basically to close this gap in terms of income they have. From an offline perspective, what we saw is they provided this cost structure information as a leaflet, which people could take away at where they paid. But people literally didn't look at it. They were not interested in taking anything about it, which ended up in customers who didn't know much about the cost structure, which obviously affects the price. How much and how badly it was affected, we will see once we know the data. Another important aspect is they had offline, they had two ways of payment. One is the traditional payment face-to-face, and the other one is anonymous in a donation box. And because of the logistics at the museum, it was set up that first there was the face-to-face till where people basically paid and the donation box was just afterwards. And so people basically did not pass this first barrier to get to the donation box, but the vast majority paid already at the till, which can be good or not good. We will see based on the data, because anonymous normally is lower prices. So it could be a strategy to set it up like that, or it could fire back, but we don't know yet. In terms of online, what they did is they engaged in like basically the suggested prices, and for every price they put an emoji as well. So if obviously from one, and the more you pay, the happier the emoji get. And also if people paid very low prices below €6, then they put a little note below the price box and said, we kindly ask for your support. And as a starting price in the price thing, they put the traditional set price, which basically is this reference price, right? Online, they also added the cost information like offline, and they also provided information about the value of the visit, which basically is famous artists and things. So I put together some things which one has to consider for such a project, and what the advantages are of doing such a project. Like, it takes some time, obviously, to discuss the context, because every context is different. Then one needs to think about the manipulations to get the best insights in terms of if maybe it's a recurring thing to do this pay what you want every year in a low peak or whatever season. Then there is kind of lots of going back and forth between the research team and the organization. And one needs to consider the impacting factors. As you saw, there is an entire list. Which targets groups should be considered. Also, there are different pay what you want price formation types. Like, one example would be that people pay, and once they leave the museum, in this case, they can say, okay, actually, I was not happy. I want to have some money back. Right? And obviously there are lots of different advantages if one does a study and one has an impact based on research as well. That's it from my side. I hope this was interesting and understanding, and I'm happy to answer questions or open for discussion.
Thank you, Brigitte. That was very good and interesting. One of the things that I'm particularly interested in explore is actually one of the big challenges we're going to have is engaging people back into cities. And I think that's going to be, because it seems to be a harder process than people expect, or people are reporting. It's harder to get people re-engaged to travel back into cities. Do we think there's a real angle here to engage people so that they do want to come and visit a lot of museums and heritage sites, which are obviously going to struggle over the next 6 months?
I can't answer this based on research, obviously, but based on from the feelings I have and from what I read is there are two different groups of people. Like, I'm doing a research with a doctorate student of mine, and she's looking at dog owners. And there is a group of dog owners who is desperate to travel. So basically in Pet Pyjamas, the platform, you may know it, they are kind of overwhelmed with bookings they get because they really want to get back to traveling. They really want to get back to moving around. However, in this context, it's obviously people can go to cottages, they can go to rural areas rather than going to cities. So if people are willing to go back to cities just based on all these things, I would think there are also different groups. There are groups, as we saw before COVID or before the entire lockdown, there were people who said, oh, I love going to the museum now because there's nobody, it's just me. And so maybe there is this group we can target now who do not care so much about, and who is not the vulnerable group. Maybe that's an important aspect as well. So who are willing to go back to cities.
It's going to be a challenge, isn't it? And in terms of the ARC Centre, wasn't it? The ARC Centre in Stockton-upon-Tees?
Yeah.
That was a 6-month project which had a 58% increase in numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Do we know how it impacted on their revenue flows?
So this is, I got this information based on a news article, and they didn't continue. They extended the projects from the 6 months to the end of the year, but then they didn't continue anymore, which I would assume in terms of revenue, it basically was not successful.
Because that's the challenge, isn't it? Because it's really interesting, because it's all about communication at the end of the day, isn't it? Is that fair?
It's all about information and trust building.
Yeah.
And from both sides. So customers need to trust that what they, basically the information they get is right. And also sellers need to trust that customers pay, because at the end of the day, it's all about making money, right?
Well, it's I mean, it's quite a leap, isn't it? David, can I bring you in this point? David Reed?
Yeah.
Sorry, after you.
So, no, go on.
I was going to say, from a restaurant point of view, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't know whether there's any data around impact on restaurant sales per square foot or profit, gross operating profit per square foot. Those would be the kind of data points that I'd be most interested in.
I'm afraid I don't have.
Yeah, because but I think the other thing that I think is really interesting, and for me, it's at the heart of the question here, is why do people choose pay what you want compared to traditional pricing structures, and what are the characteristics of people who do choose? Did you have any data on that?
From a supplier's point of view?
Sorry?
From a supplier's
No, I mean customers. What compels somebody to say, oh, let's go to the pay what you want restaurant, rather than a traditional? What is it? They think they're going to get a cheaper meal? Is it because I don't know? What are the compelling reasons, behavioural reasons?
So from what we know from research, there are different groups again. So some groups like to go to pay what you want restaurants because they prefer to go more often and pay less. So which ends up in they feeling still fair about what they receive and what they pay, right? But then there's also the group which is not very comfortable with pay what you want situations, because they feel stressed out, but being put in the situation to set the price, right? So, and this is why closing this information gap is so important, to also reduce this stress level, basically. So yeah, I think it depends on the customer if they really like it, but they are going, what we know from research is that the first time goers, they just find it funny, they find it interesting to do something new, and maybe in a group, and see how it goes. And those who go more often is a lot of the time I can go more often, but because I go more often, I deserve to pay a little less, kind of.
So sort of creating your own discount structure.
Yes.
Interesting.
Warren, can I bring you in here from a club point of view? As you re-engaged, you're obviously doing some innovative work yourself.
Well, yeah, obviously as a club structure, we are quite transparent with our financials already, just because of the nature of the kind of business that we are. You know, I'll be trying to think about how we could use it within the club, because obviously we also got a very much, you know, we've got a charitable arm. We're not for profit, you know, we've got lots of different factors. We've got educational projects that we fund. And you know, we're currently now looking at legacy funding as well for moving forward, but obviously providing some kind of service or offering that the club can do, which we've always done to members. And actually, you know, listening to the research, and I think it's something that could possibly work quite well in certain areas, particularly in the arts and the musical side, because we can use the emotional kind of impact a little bit, because, you know, artists, like, well, I suppose like a lot of businesses are suffering at the moment and not getting any income. So I think there could be a particular benefit for that, as long as we are then transparent in almost sharing whatever money we come in, and you know, in a way we got our cost price, but then, you know, actually, would you also like to support, you know, the artists, and in addition, would you also like to support our educational project, et cetera, and kind of create different layers. So I could very much see that potentially working quite well, and we are looking at all different offers at the moment, because we've got lots and lots of works that we're planning. So.
In terms of arts, maybe I can add something. In Vienna, we are trying to get a collaboration with comedians who have basically, because of COVID, they set up a website where they stream all different kind of acts they have. And they also base it on donations. And we don't know the real outcome, but the looks of it and by the customer base they have is they are making quite some money with this approach, because people feel a bit sorry, because all artists struggle, and even more so generally struggle, because it's like an up and down in if they have something going on or not. And even more so now in the COVID situation, where it was a complete lockdown, right? But I can't say anything how successful. It just looks from the base of customers they have that it works really well for them.
I think it's quite an innovative idea, isn't it? I suppose,
Yeah.
particularly for all those theatres that are closed at the moment, how people have to find a new income flow. It is quite interesting, isn't it? It's taking the old busking and taking it to another level.
Yeah.
In a very different way.
And they also do like, they also do like a weekly just discussion to discuss what's going on. I mean, for them, obviously, it's a good topic because there are lots of things where you can make fun of it, as serious as the situation is, but people need to laugh as well. So they took or embraced the entire situation and turned it around for their advantage, I would say.
I mean, the real question when it comes to the restaurants, isn't it? And you've obviously talked about the restaurants that closed as well, which people didn't pay. It must be quite dispiriting to keep a high customer service level going when you see pricings going the opposite way to what you hope it's going to be going.
In terms of when you have to pay what you want context.
Well, if a customer doesn't pay what you expect them to pay, it's very hard to keep a motivated staff going and actually keep your own motivation going, because it must come dispiriting, because it is quite tough, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the restaurant where it's working anyway. But for example, if we look at this Bandera case, I was reading quite a bit of news of them, and they really tried hard, and they also put parts of their income for charities. So they really wanted to make this like a good kind of case. But at the end, they had to give up. And yeah, it must have been very frustrating because they had this large group, which basically, yeah, and the question is how you deal with those people. You can't just lock them out, or what are you going to do with them, right?
Well, it's how you create the right service standard, isn't
Yeah.
it? Paula, can I bring you this point? From a restaurant point of view, or food and beverage point of view, your thoughts?
Yeah, I suppose it is a tricky one, because I agree with you, Chris, in terms of it must be quite demotivating if you are delivering a very high level of customer service, and you know the team is very engaged in sort of delivering that, and yet people are consistently, I suppose, underpaying in terms of then the sort of cost structure for the business. I suppose my questions are, the margins are so tight in restaurants already. There's a big risk, isn't there, that if then a large proportion don't, but equally, I suppose, if you based it more on a business that was doing good, so maybe more a sort of a business that had a more ethical business model, so maybe it was about a lot of what they're doing is going to different charitable causes, I can actually see with the right marketing and the right communication that actually there would be an engagement, if actually that by going there you would be contributing to the well-being of the community or supporting more about the vulnerable and needy in those areas. So I can see a business that was set up with those principles and purpose that was more about doing good than it necessarily was about profits. Mm-hmm. Making, and by doing that you're employing people and you've got a great business and you're delivering great food from local suppliers, and I suppose I can see that being something that could work.
More social enterprise.
I think more social enterprise, or otherwise I recognise as a short-term strategy it's quite interesting. I think there is something quite interesting about, I suppose, testing that and seeing how people respond. And if they're given the right information, I suppose you would hope that people would want to do the right, pay a fair price for a sort of nice experience. Yeah.
Well, I think that's the thing that comes out, Brigitte, isn't it? People do want to pay fairly. I mean, that's
this is what people say. But I also have, and I should mention maybe, most of the studies done are like low price kind of level. So there is not like high quality or luxury goods kind of studies around, because this kind of added value is not something I think which works in this context, because people would not pay naturally. Even, I don't know how one can see in terms of fairness or how one can interpret this. But as you said, Paula, as a short-term strategy, it may even be for luxury brands, it may even be good for them, or for a bit, not luxury, maybe a bit higher priced products, because you can reach new target groups, you can maybe get some customers from competitors, you can get this media coverage for being innovative, or you can also change your image slightly. So a lot of research is also showing that if you engage in things like this or have different whatever campaigns every now and then, this impacts on your image to be how people see you.
I mean, it is a short-term thing. But the thing is to how to re-engage people, which is the reason why I thought it'd be relevant for this period of time. Ramesh, can I bring you in? Do you think lawyers will work on pay as you wish?
Yeah.
You're on mute, Ramesh.
You're on mute, Ramesh. You're still on mute, I'm afraid.
We already questioned whether lawyers are essential workers, but I'll let that pass. But I think we do it slightly differently in terms of making people do or engage in pro bono work. I think that's the limit. But Chris, I was quite fascinated because I've seen this work in a different way, and I've personally experienced it. Recently, they had a comedy thing with cricket legends with Rory Bremner, and they invited me to be on a Zoom call, and they said it was £25 each, but including a meal. So I bought 2 tickets. And then they insisted that I had to order a meal. So whether it was a burger or a pizza. So I ordered 2 pizzas and 2 drinks, and 5 o'clock on the dot, just as the thing was starting, 2 massive pizzas were delivered with a bill attached to it, which said £35. So 2 hours later, I started feeling really guilty because A, the pizzas were nice, the drinks were nice, but the conversation was fantastic. And I thought to myself, look, I've had such fantastic value. The guilt set in, and I then donated twice that amount because of the guilt I felt, and I felt, look, I'd had value, and really, I just couldn't understand how the concept worked. Unless there was somebody sponsoring the meal, but the bill was sent just to sort of make me feel even more guilty. So it left me confused, but at the end of it, I still felt happy that I got involved with it. I'm not sure about the restaurant concept, and I do understand the point about nationalities, because some nationalities, I'm sorry to say, I'm part of one of those, which probably goes in there and says, I'm looking for value for money. And what is value for money is what I'm deciding, not what the restaurant is serving me. So but thankfully, I lived in England long enough to be slightly different. But I also feel that if I go a second time, I'd go because I'm more interested in the food rather than the fact that it's going to just fill a hole in my tummy and it's cheap.
I'm interested, if I can just interject, Ramesh. I think I'm interested in the differences between businesses who are pricing their product where the cost, like a restaurant, marginally goes up each time you increase volume, whereas some products, the cost is the same. And there was a really interesting experiment with, I think Radiohead 10 years ago, launched in Rainbows on their website, a whole album on their website, pay what you want. And the average price paid was, I think, $2 for a download, which was actually much less than the typical price. And in fact, enormous numbers of people downloaded it just for free because they could. And this whole thing about, you know, the actual marginal cost actually must have an impact as well. If you perceive that somebody's had to spend stuff on you versus when, like a CD, actually, frankly, it was lying around there anyway.
I didn't hear the last part.
All I was saying was that when it's an album of music, it's already made. There's no incremental cost when you download it.
I mean, as we can see, that there are lots of like online products like Humble, for example, or this Adblock, who use this concept, and also artists nowadays use it for CDs, and like Radiohead years ago, which for them makes it profitable, because people also pictures, if you look at those picture platforms where you can get pictures for free, they say donate now. And for them, it works well, obviously. For restaurants, where the margin is different depending on how many guests you have, basically, I must say there is not a real, if I understand your question, to look at how to deal with the different amount of customers, or what was the question exactly?
Well, once the product's made, it's about the marginal cost. That's right, David?
Yeah, I was really just, yeah, exactly.
It's an observation. Yeah.
There's no marginal cost
Yeah.
in a CD download. There is in a restaurant.
There is, yeah.
There's always cost. Oh, look, I'm sorry, we're running out of time, so my apologies for having to bring this to close. Brigitte, can I say great thank you? That was thought-provoking.
Thank you.
Really interesting. It is how we actually re-engage people. I think in different thinking is actually going to be really important, particularly for heritage sites and museums. I think it's particularly so, as well as theatres probably as well, during a period of time. So thank you so much, and thank you for everyone for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.